we get out of Iraq, that doesn't end the war.
Certainly not.
Right.
Certainly, I believe that the democracy project is one that was flawed from the beginning, also because of things having to do with the life of Muhammad. That Muhammad was a political leader, and Islam is a political entity. It has always been such. As a matter of fact, the year 1 of the Islamic calendar is not what Westerners might expect. I speak around the country and I always ask the crowds this, and I've never had one that guessed it right. I say, what do you think year 1 of the Islamic calendar is? And they say, when Muhammad was born. Nope. When Muhammad died. Nope. When Muhammad became a prophet and received his first revelation. Nope. And those are the 3 I usually get. The fact is that the year 1 of the Islamic calendar is the beginning of the Hijrah, when Muhammad left Mecca, settled in Medina, and became for the first time a political and military leader. And it's when Islam became a political entity, that's year 1. And that indicates how deeply ingrained the political aspect of Islam is within the religion itself. It is not a religion that teaches, as Jesus did, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's and to God that which is God's. It is a religion that is essentially political. And the political aspect of Islam, the laws for the governing of a society, the laws for how a state relates to other states, are just as much considered to be part of the law of God himself as are the laws governing individual behavior. And this is rooted in Muhammad's own teachings.
Right. You know, many more people on the right, myself included, have come to this understanding, belatedly, but better late than never, I suppose. You know, the question is, like, you know, from a Washington standpoint, is there anybody on the left that is coming to this epiphany? Because it's only then that, you know, that there will be this embrace of, you know, the need to fight jihad on the jihad battleground.
None that I know of. I know that there's some individuals, some people have written to me at Jihad Watch and said, I'm a liberal, I'm a leftist, I'm a Democrat, and I support what you're doing. And I appreciate that very much, because I believe very strongly that this is not a liberal or conservative issue. This is an issue of national survival and civilizational survival. And it's not as if the left, for all the alliances that it has made with jihad elements, is going to be spared from this, the conversion or subjugation or violence imperative.
Right, right. But you would think that there would be some awareness there. I mean, some of their pet causes, particularly, you know, women's rights and the protection of homosexuals and civil liberties, you know, all the Danish cartoons, but, you know, they were ducking under the table, you know, during all of those things.
You would think so.
Do you think, but here's the thing, do you think that learning about the life of Muhammad and how his life has affected how the jihadis treat women now, for example, I mean, is that going to do any good? I mean, I hate to be a pessimist about it, but...
Well, you know, you can lead a horse to water.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to raise awareness of these things.
Yeah.
That's all I'm doing. Just bring these things out into the open.
Right.
And so everyone can see that they exist. But the capacity for denial in human nature is extraordinary. And you take, for example, Lynn Stewart, the lawyer for Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman, who was recently convicted of aiding in jihad terror activity by passing messages from him to his henchmen outside the prison. And Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman, of course, was the mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, and he's now in prison in the United States. And they asked Lynn Stewart why she did this. And she said, I don't think that the struggle against racism and sexism can be carried on solely by peaceful means.
Right.
And I think the really outlandish thing about that, the really unbelievable thing about that, is that she thinks Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman is struggling against racism and sexism. Imagine if he had the world he wanted. Where would Lynn Stewart be?
Yeah.
Completely covered up and in a house, secluded, and unable to do any kind of work at all, except clean house and cook meals.
Right. You know, talking about the race card and this Islamophobia card that, you know, you have to counter every day, there it seems that we have made progress. And if you look at the backlash against the 6 flying imams, it's remarkable to me that there haven't been any polls, but people are not buying their line. And the word is getting out there, thanks in large part, I think, to the internet, talk radio, alternative media. But when these people have inroads into the White House and the current administration, I mean, what good does that do? You know, that there's a public outcry, and yet, you know, they're more closely tied to law enforcement and to the Department of Homeland Security than they ever have been since September 11th.
Yes, they are. And it's just the same thing again. Every victory for them is a defeat, and every defeat is a victory. Right. And it's a strange situation, but it plays out very well with the flying imams. Reminds me of the flying nuns.
What a big
But they are pushing for, CARE is pushing for congressional hearings against racial and religious profiling. What they want to do is to make it illegal for airport officials to stop a Muslim, no matter how suspiciously he's behaving, in an airport. Now, can you imagine that's giving carte blanche to Islamic terrorists in airports? But that's what they want, and that's what they might get. At the same time, though, you're right. There is increasing public awareness. Every one of these incidents, it's becoming more and more clear that what's going on here is not racism or discrimination. It's just self-protection. It's national security. And it's perfectly reasonable for these men to have been stopped. I was very pleased when I saw Tucker Carlson, who is not someone that I would have thought had a tremendous awareness of this issue, but he interviewed Arsalan Iftikhar of CARE, and he wouldn't let him get away with anything. And he said, this flies to see. I think that it is becoming clear that this is a large-scale attempt to intimidate the American people and to push through to Mau public officials to get what they want and to make it impossible for Islamic terrorists to be subjected to the scrutiny they would need to be subjected to be stopped. And the more of that awareness that there is, then it is possible that we can head off these legislative initiatives. But it's going to be close. It's going to be a close-run thing.
Right. In the last chapter of the book, you have some concrete proposals about what to do. I mean, once people really understand the true legacy of Muhammad, how it's relevant today, and what it is we can do to prevent the spread of jihad in the U.S. And one of the things you talk about is immigration.
Oh, yes.
What should we do?
Well, there are many things, and there are a number of steps that I think need to be taken incrementally to deal with this problem. I mean, the foremost difficulty that we have is that there is no Islamic body that has excommunicated, in effect, Osama bin Laden or people who believe what he believes. And there is no way, therefore, to determine whether a Muslim believes in the jihad and will ultimately want to act upon that belief, or whether he rejects it. There's no way to tell.
Right.
Now, that would seem to me to be something that we have to take into account as a matter of national security when considering immigration questions. The immediate thing that we can do, but by no means the only thing that we must do ultimately, is, I believe, institute far more stringent requirements for visa applicants, student visas included, and immigration applicants in general. I have developed, actually, a questionnaire on this basis that tries to sharpen the issue a little bit. Right now, as far as I understand, the immigration application asks applicants, are you a terrorist? And has an asterisk attached to the question saying, if you answer yes, it does not mean that you will be barred from the United States.
Right.
Now, that's beyond absurd.
Yeah.
And so I propose that it be replaced with a very specific application, of which I have a draft, that would focus the issue on areas of Islamic Sharia law that are incompatible with the U.S. Constitution and U.S. values. What do you think of rights for women? What do you think about someone who wants to change his religion? What do you think about the ultimate idea of replacing U.S. Constitution with Islamic Sharia law? And various very specific questions along those lines. Now, obviously we wouldn't be expecting honest answers and think, oh, you don't believe all these things. Well, come on in and enjoy yourself. But it would be putting the United States government on record and putting the applicant on notice that these things are not welcome here, and that we certainly do believe in freedom of religion. We uphold freedom of religion, but the United States government has acted in the interests of the general welfare against religious beliefs in the past. Mm-hmm. Polygamy is outlawed, and that's a religious belief. And there are various other things. Human sacrifice is outlawed, obviously, and yet there are religions that have taught this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So it's not as if there are no precedents for working against religious beliefs when they are going against the common welfare.
Right.
We need to start subjecting these Islamic groups to all the scrutiny and all the laws that apply to political groups.
I think that this focus on the perils of Sharia law is so important. And people think of it as a far-off thing. Oh, that's happening in Europe. That's a phenomenon that's not going to cross the pond over here. And yet people, even if they don't know the term Sharia, again, there are these stories that pop up in the headlines, and there's a visceral reaction to them, like the Muslim woman who's complaining about getting interrupted praying at her gym.
Yes.
I don't know if it's Dearbornistan or Detroit or wherever it is. But people have a sense that there is a threat to their freedoms here.
There is, and it's proceeding very cleverly, because this woman in Michigan is saying this is a civil rights issue, and they're interfering with my freedom of religion and my basic human dignity and so on. When really, whoever tried to pray in a gym? I mean, when did you ever get the idea that you had a right to pray in a gym? But they're very skillfully playing upon American national traumas about racism, which is the foremost American national trauma. And since, Islam is not a race, anybody of any race can be a Muslim, and there are Muslims of every race. And so really it's not a racial issue ultimately at all, but casting it in those terms repeatedly with the imams, and again with this woman in Michigan, they're able to play on these phobias that are so deep in the national character that they're able to get what they want. And so we need to start to speak honestly about these issues and understand that this is a totalitarian ideology that is one that would subvert our political life and drastically alter the nature of our society, that it is proceeding according to these small initiatives that are designed to break down our resistance to this kind of behavior, and that we need to stand up and call it what it is, and deal with it as what it is, and speak realistically about it. There's such an unreality pervading the public discourse about this. There was even a national conservative magazine editor who wrote that even if Islam is not a religion of peace, we have to pretend that it is, and that will encourage the moderate Muslims. And I think this is beyond ridiculous. Nothing's going to encourage moderate Muslims, sincere Muslim reformers, except speaking about what needs reforming.
Right.
And nothing is going to encourage any kind of sanity in the public discourse except the truth. And that's what the book is dedicated to bringing out.
Robert Spencer, thank you so much for your life, for your work, for your bravery, for opening our eyes. The book is The Truth About Muhammad, founder of the world's most intolerant religion. I'm Michelle Malkin for Hot Air TV. See you next time.